Hi, my name is...
Hey, historic players. It is time to begin brewing with the new Alchemy cards. We've got the Phyrexia All-is-One Alchemy set has come out, and it's kind of crazy. Mainly, this guy that you can see from the intro, Phyresis Roach, is kind of insane. I made a black-green deck earlier on this channel that showed off how Finn the Fangbearer and a bunch of the Death Touch rats worked out really well. And this is crazily better. Like, obviously, if I could have gotten a green rat that made rats get toxic one, that would have been broken. But actually, there's a lot of insects that still work really well in this shell. Obviously, Phyresis Roach gives itself an extra toxic one whenever it hits the opponent, and every other copy of itself, but also Battlefly Swarm, which is flying, will gain toxic, but also can be given Death Touch, so that Finn the Fangbearer also gives like an extra poison counters. Bilious Skull Dweller, which we were playing in the rat deck, even though it wasn't a rat, because it has both toxic and Death Touch. This card is like the ultimate center of the Venn diagram for what we're looking at trying to do. Skittering Heartstopper is the same as Battlefly Swarm, but doesn't have flying, but does have one extra toughness. And then we've got Brain Maggot. I get a toxic creature that rips cards out of my opponent's hand. That seems kind of good. And then everything else is kind of like staying power. So we've got Necrogen Communion, because that will not only, if I play it on turn 2, mean that I'm dealing 3 poison counters straight away, but also it'll keep my Phyresis Roach alive. The whole build is kind of around trying to keep Phyresis Roach alive. So the Communion, and then we've got Tivar and Jarsil, both of which will return my toxic creatures from the graveyard to play. And like, we're literally going into red for 2 cards, right? One is Jarsil, because he says on turn 3, return any of my 1-drops to play, right? But Jarsil also does this thing where he casts Ancestral Anger from the graveyard. And when you cast something from the graveyard with Jarsil, it doesn't leave that zone. So when you cast Ancestral Anger, it counts itself. You give one of your 4 or 5 infect, 4 or 5 toxic triggers, creatures trample, and some extra power. And you draw a card, which is kind of crazy. There is a few games that you're about to see where basically all I do is throw down all my little guys, and then all I care about is trying to just keep board presence. And that's literally the whole game plan. Just keep some board presence happening. Sometimes it means I have to roll over some things with Ancestral Anger. Sometimes it means I have to avoid removal by using Necrogen Communion, or just bringing guys back to make sure that I still have a board state. And then just putting so many poison counters on my opponent. It's so many. Anyway, let's have a look at some games. Okay, so off the bat here, we're keeping a really strong hand. We've got Phyresis Roach on 1, Necrogen Communion on 2, and then 2 follow-up creatures that can work really well here. And then the Jarsil is basically there to bring back Phyresis Roach on the first turn that is in play, and then on the second turn, we get to bring back Necrogen Communion, which is pretty crazy. But we've already got them down to 3 poison counters on their turn 1. Which is 1/3 of the way there, right? That's like dealing 7 damage to your opponent on the first turn, on the second turn rather. And then it looks like my opponent is on a similar infect plan. And And so I just kind of run out my guys. He's sort of forced to block here because taking 4 infect on the 3rd turn is basically a death sentence. But my number of toxic creatures in play doesn't change. Which is pretty good, but my output potential is lowered. And kind of at this point, my opponent's just scrambling to do anything. Meanwhile, I can just play out my entire hand. Ideally, something like Finn would have been better here. But I'm just like throwing out Jarsil to be mana efficient. But I'm like either board wipe or I'm winning, basically. It looks like my opponent's on a deck where they try and put 1 poison counter on me and then proliferate forever. And it's not going very well. Not going very well for them. I just have way too much pressure. Way too much pressure. And there's the concede. Because I had mega fatal next turn. I was putting like 14 poison counters on the next turn. So this hand was a mulligan. Any mulligans in this, I'll put 3 drops back in the deck. And the reason that Jarsil and Tivar are in there and why we're in these colors is because I thought it was better than playing the companion because it's like way less mana efficient and feels like the tempo is way off comparatively because you just want to be constantly doing stuff. Spending their turn putting a companion in your hand is too slow. Whereas something like this, I've got 3 guys in play. I've got so much toxic potential in play already. And then we're going to have Finn following up as well. So there's like actually so much happening. If my opponent is just like doing nothing or not interacting with my board, they'll die on turn 4 most of the time. So here my opponent kind of makes the mistake to block the potential Death Touch guy when they should have been blocking the Phyresis Roach instead. Because the Roach is giving me so much advantage here. And then they're literally within Fatal already. Like they have to board wipe me right now. Or it's over, really. Okay, so he knocks out the Finn, but Finn is only 2 counters per trigger. It's not the same. It's not going to be enough, but that is exactly 10. If my opponent had killed one of the other 2 creatures, he would have only taken 2 infects from Finn connecting. So I feel like my opponent made a few misplays there and let me get some free value. But here, same as before, any mulligan, I would normally just put Tivar in, but because we have double Finn, I can keep 1. Here, I kind of throw out the attack to see which one's better, Finn or Phyresis Roach, because I'm not really sure what they're playing. Because Finn is better if they're playing stuff like Shock or whatever, because he can dodge some of the removal. Whereas playing out the second Roach means that I'm getting more toxic boost triggers. And my opponent blocks incorrectly here. If they block the 1/1, the on-hit effect doesn't trigger, and I don't get extra toxic on all my guys. Which is kind of a big misplay. Here I have Tivar, so I can just like literally run it in. Anything that dies, I can bring back, and my board state doesn't really change. But my opponent gets more poison counters. And I like to bring back the freshly milled Brain Maggot instead, just to have a look and see if they had a board wipe in hand. And it looks like they just have like a pile of dragons, so I just try to take out a blocker instead. And then we hit the Ancestral Anger, which basically means we're going to connect with something. However, I made a misplay. And I've literally seen Sure Strike in their hand. Sorry, Storm Strike in their hand. Knows that it gives first strike. I still run into it in its entirety. But that's fine. Like, I have Tivar. I can just bring back something. Which is, in this case, the Brain Maggot. Oh, wait. I've just milled something that has flying, and my opponent, unless he plays a dragon, has no way to stop my flying creature. And there's no way to stop me from getting in. See, even if you had less than 7, I can play Finn, give the Battlefly Swarm Death Touch, and then hit them for 5 Toxic counters. Like, that's pretty lethal in most circumstances. So, like, once you get going, the actual reach of this deck is insane. Alright, and that is Jund Infect. We went into a whole third color that doesn't have any toxic creatures in it. Just because I think Jarsil is that crazy. Jarsil just playing cards out of your graveyard for free is so good. And especially because the cards like Phyresis Roach perpetually makes the cards in your graveyard still have more toxic, that when you bring them back and it's like, all I have to do is hit you and I'm putting 4 or 5 counters on you. And it's like actually way more powerful than just ripping cards off the top that you're like, maybe good. And so yeah, that's what I've been playing with lately. It's crazy. If you like some of the stuff, I have a playlist for other historic content that I've made, and it's like I make a lot of different stuff on this channel. I got Marvel Snap stuff, I got some regular board game stuff, and I do some devlog stuff for the different games that I make. If you want to check some of that stuff out, that would be really cool of you. So I hope to see you in the next video.